Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes on the Rebirth server. We are with Quintessence last, our level 25 Brute, who has 400,000 experience, about 40,000 to go to get to level 26, and 2.5 million influence. And I screwed up. I was unfortunately pausing and unpausing video a little bit in the last recording I made, which was the end of the Wheel of Destruction story arc. And sadly, I screwed it up and I paused when I was supposed to unpause, or unpause when I was supposed to pause. I don't know what happened, but I didn't get a good recording of it. So unfortunately, I'm not able to show you the end of the Wheel of Destruction. So it's that outdoor mission where you have to find the different pieces of the wheel, and then you go and defeat the bad guy who is just a lieutenant. If you'd like to see that, there is footage of that both with Silver Phoenix and Tiger Strike, so you can go back and find those. And if you want to know exactly which episode, leave a comment and I'll go back and find it, or maybe Kievar or somebody who's watched it can tell us which episode it is. Um, I might actually, I have a spreadsheet of every single episode I did for both Silver Phoenix and Tiger Strike. I haven't done it since because there's just no point to doing that anymore. But I actually have a spreadsheet, so I could go back and look. If anybody wants to, let me know, and you can go back and see what that ending is like. After that, since we're level 25, we have new contacts to work on, and I started with Miriam Bleckel, who I think is supposed to give us the Scroll of Tieleku. And her first mission was to go save the Circle of Thorns. This is what it says, right? Her first mission is, I want you to help the Circle. The Circle is working on a big ceremony to bind a deity. That wasn't bad enough. It's one of the deities of the Banished Pantheon. The Banished Pantheon is moving into position, and they plan to destroy the obelisk the Circle is using to focus their spell. Now, here's the scary part. If the obelisk is destroyed, it could take out an entire section of the city. If you can't keep that obelisk intact, I'm afraid this mission will be a failure. You'll need to defeat everybody at that ceremony, but make sure the obelisk remains intact. So go save the Circle of Thorns by literally defeating the Circle of Thorns. Now, we're on +0. Why? Because I went into this mission and I don't want to say I got my butt handed to me. I was defeated once, but I kept having to run. And the reason is that everything in here is +2, and it's all Nervous Spectral demons and the other kinds of demons. And so they're just constantly debuffing me. I couldn't hit them. They were constantly, I'd have to get into a spawn, fight one, run away, recover, run back, and fight the other two because I couldn't fight three at once when they're +2 to me. I was downing Lux like there was nobody business, and they kept hitting me. I'm downing Yellows like there's nobody's business, and I couldn't hit them. And a lot of it's just due to the +2, right? The way it scales, especially at this level, +2 is just really brutal. Especially when you can do it if you're not being debuffed, but if you start getting debuffed, +2 is just horrible. So this is also an enormous mission. If it was a small mission, I would have said screw it, I'll just endure it. But and so this is the fun part. When I walked in here on a +1 mission, these guys were +2. When I walk in here on a +0 mission, they're +0. So you're going to say, why are you having trouble? Well, yeah, you have a lot less trouble when it's one guy, when it's a white guy, right? The oranges and the yellows are much harder. The white cons do not get a level-based bonus to hit you the way the yellows and the oranges do. And when there are like 6 oranges or 3 oranges all fighting and debuffing you at the same time, it's much harder. And you also have a lower chance to hit the oranges, right? So you're already under, you starting a battle. These guys give you like -7 per debuff they lay on you, and you can see they're laying several. You start a battle already at like -7 or something to hit them because they're orange. So it's literally when you're fighting an orange one of these guys, like they've already debuffed you before the battle began. And then when they lay an additional debuff on you, it's like there are more debuffs. So we're going to just have to work this group of missions, I guess. As long as it's circle, we're going to have to work it at +0. Banished Pantheon, I could do a +1. You guys saw that in the previous episode, I believe. But circle, it's just too hard to deal with these guys at this level when they're +2 to you, and even at higher levels. Just the constant missing makes everything A, more difficult, and B, wildly more frustrating. these guys won't notice me. Try to move a little bit further away just so they don't notice. This is a defeat all, so we've got to crawl through Orenbega and find every single one. My guess is this will be the only mission we're going to do in this episode because, well, A, I need to get to cleaning my my 3 bathrooms today, and B, it's going to be a really long mission. This could take like 45 minutes just to do this one mission. See if we can taunt this guy away from the others. Right, beating 1 and then 2 is so much easier than fighting all 3 at once, just because they can lay so many fewer debuffs on you. Okay, he disappeared. He's going to come back, though. So as we're crawling through this dungeon, this mission, and slowly beating the Circle of Thorns one at a time, I want to talk about something having to do with role-playing games. This, again, came up in the context of D&D, but it could happen anywhere in any game that is tabletop. Harder to do, possible, but much harder to do in a computer game because computer games are designed to prevent it generally, especially in MMO. But what I want to talk about a little bit is cheating and and how do you deal with it if you have somebody playing in your game who's cheating. Right now, obviously, in a computer game like City of Heroes, they have mechanisms designed to stop you from cheating. And they have logs that they can check to see if you've cheated. Sorry, I've got some morning voice, so I'm going to be clearing my throat a little bit. They can stop you, and can have logs that you cheated, and they can ban you for cheating, and so on. But you're not playing City of Heroes. Well, you're playing the game maybe with friends, but the developers of City of Heroes aren't your friends. It's much harder. What's going on here? Why am I stuck? Alright, so that taunt didn't work because I got stuck on the terrain. It's much harder when you have a good friend who's playing the game with you, and you find out that they're cheating at their die rolls, or they're cheating at something else, and how do you handle it? So the one DM came on and he said he had a player cheating at his spells. So they were fighting a Hydra. Hydras regenerate unless they've been hit with fire damage. And he cast, it's a Warlock. I don't know Warlocks at all because I don't have one in my party and I've never played one. But he said this Warlock was, he cast some sort of a spell that the player said it does fire damage. And so the GM was like, okay, then it can't regenerate. Now, I don't know how the player knew that Hydras regenerate when they take fire damage. It's fairly common knowledge for veteran players. One question I would have as a GM is how would your character know that, right? And sometimes my players will even ask me, is it common knowledge of X? And I'll say, well, maybe I'll say, I forgot to switch to combat jump, which is why we're running out of endurance. Maybe I'll say make a history check or a nature check or an arcana check to see if your character would actually know this, right? And if they make the roll, say, yes, you've heard that Hydras are vulnerable to fire. But if they fail it, as well, you haven't heard that, then their job as a player is to roleplay that their character doesn't know it, and then maybe say something like, okay, well, my character is going to use Lightning Bolt instead of Fireball on this thing because it doesn't know. Or, all right, can I roll to see which spell I would cast, because I'm not sure which one he'd cast here. He might cast Fireball, but I feel like I don't want to metagame. A great example of this having nothing to do with spells is my players came upon what is essentially a map of the plains. It's they're my plains, so it's not laid out exactly like the map of the plains in official D&D literature, but it's close enough is based on it. It's close enough to it that an experienced player seeing it would probably know what it was. And when they came across this map, it was actually like an inscription on a temple floor. My best friend who saw it said, "Well, I know what this is, but my character wouldn't know what it is, so I won't say anything." And I suspect everyone but the new player knew what it was as soon as they saw it, because it just looks physically, sort of the way the circles. It's a bunch of circles on the page, some circles inside other circles, and the way it's laid out is, again, it's not exactly like the planes, but it's close enough that someone who's familiar with the Great Wheel cosmology of D&D would look at this and say, well, it looks an awful lot like the Great Wheel. So that's what you're supposed to do, is to say, well, my character wouldn't know this, so I'm not going to react to it. Anyway, so this guy, somehow his character knew whether that was legit or not, that Hydras take damage from fire, and he said this spell does fire damage. And the DM was like, okay, and so the Hydra didn't regenerate, and then the DM looked at the spell later on, and he was like, wait a minute, this spell doesn't do fire damage, it does radiant damage. It's a totally different thing. Radiant damage, oh, this is a lieutenant. Radiant damage is like light damage. Light and fire are not the same thing in D&D as a special effect. Just like here, if there's fire and there's radiation, and if something has, like, I have defense against fire, that's not going to protect me against radiation, which is, I don't know, energy or something. And so, so the DM was like, no, that's not fire, it's radiant. The guy said, oh, I made a mistake. Okay. But then, he said later, he cast some spell or other, and the player was like, I counterspell it. And the DM said, okay, now they play this on Roll20 and D&D Beyond, and it's not clear to me if they actually have their character sheets in D&D Beyond, or, look at this, 2 accuracy inspirations, and I can't hit. It's not clear to me if they have their, I still can't hit. Look at this, he's got me floored. It's not clear to me if they have their characters in D&D Beyond and just use Roll20 to do maps and stuff, or if they have their actual characters and stats in Roll20 as well as D&D Beyond. It's not clear if the players have put their characters into the DM's campaign in D&D Beyond, which you have to do to see the character sheet. So, I'm not sure how much access the DM had to the character sheets in live play, but he said when he went back and looked, the guy didn't have counterspell on his character sheet. Like, he didn't it's a spell that the warlock has access to, but his character didn't actually know it. So he shouldn't have been able to cast it. And so, he said the guy's cheating. He's lying about what his spells can do, and he's lying about which spells he has prepared. And what do I do about this? And of course, there sometimes are people who come on, especially these are online games. Not everybody uses a virtual tabletop, and not everybody uses the die rolling in a virtual tabletop. I do. Like my players actually have the choice. And when we first started to play, we all rolled on the table. And I trusted them, and everything was fine. And then once we started playing in Foundry Virtual Tabletop, the first one player started rolling within the tabletop because they were really cool looking dice. And then the next player, and then the next player, and eventually everybody just rolls in the virtual tabletop now except me. I like rolling physical dice. Right, and as a GM, right, you can, if you want, you can cheat anyway, and nobody's going to know because you normally roll behind the screen. Now, as I've mentioned here, there are certain rolls I make which I will roll in front of the players, especially when they're trying to do something to a monster or an NPC that they really want to have work, and that NPC gets a saving throw. I will roll it in the open, so that they know If it's something like hold monster, that's going to force the monster to freeze, and basically it's called a save or suck spell. If that hold monster hits, the monster will be unable to move or do anything or attack or anything like that until it then makes a saving throw later. And it basically locks him in place. He fails the saving throw, and then everybody can just beat on a helpless enemy for an entire round. And he can't do anything. He can't block it. He can't react. He can't hit back. And so this is, basically it'll end the battle, right? And a lot of game masters hate powers like hold person because of this. Legendary creatures in D&D get legendary saving throws where they can choose one or more times, sometimes as many as 3 times in a battle, to succeed at a saving throw they failed. And so if you have a boss you really don't want to get hit with this, you should make it a legendary monster and then give it some legendary saves. And the guy, actually, the one time when I started doing these rolling in the open, like, I knew the guy had a legendary saving throw. Oh, this is going to be terrible, because I only have 2 accuracies against this guy. I don't know if we should maybe wander around some more. I'm afraid I'm going to lose that he's here. Let's try some luck. I can't believe I have to treat this guy like an elite boss. But we have to, because otherwise he's going to kick my butt. Because I won't be able to hit him. So the lucks are to make sure he can't hit me too many times, to lay multiple debuffs on me. And the accuracies are to try to hit him. See if we can fear him. That might help. Nope, missed. I'm basically just trying to do as much damage to this guy as fast as possible before my buffs wear off. Okay. We survived that, but I'm going to have to go out to the hospital and get some more inspirations. Anyway. So we have this situation where you have players cheating, and what do you do about it, right? That's really the question. Like, what do you do about it? There's cheating at die rolls, and then there's cheating by lying about what your character has on their sheet, and then there's cheating by lying about what the rules say that you can do on your character sheet. Where the hell are we? Okay. So each one of these things is bad. They're cheating. You shouldn't do it. And how do you handle it? And the problem actually is that it's very difficult to handle, because if you talk to the player about it, you almost can't talk to them without accusing them of cheating, right? Because you have to explain to them, look, you're having your character do things that it doesn't say in the rules they can do. Now, if it's a very new player, you might be able to take them aside and say, look, Joe, I was looking over your character sheet, and you had your character doing some things that the rules don't say they can do, and let me explain to you how these rules work, right? And make it so that they can save face a little bit, right? If they can say, oh, I just didn't understand the rules, then at least you can have the conversation without them getting their back up. But I don't know that that's an actual solution. I mean, it solves the confrontation issue so that it's a little less uncomfortable of a conversation. But if the person if they're new and they just made a mistake, that's fine, right? And I've had players say that, and I've done that and said, oh, guys, I made a mistake. This spell shouldn't have worked this way. Now, that's not cheating. That's just making a mistake, right? Actual mistakes are not a problem. They're no issue at all. The problem is if the person is doing it deliberately, as non-adversarial as you may make it, by saying, "Oh, I assume you just were making a mistake, and let me help you correct the mistake." You've got a player who, by their very nature, is trying to have their character do things the rules don't say the character can do. And they know it, and they're doing it on purpose. And you can pretend, and he can pretend, or she can pretend, that you all think that it was a mistake. But if we know it's real, and you know it was on purpose, that's not going to correct the behavior, right? What it tells them is the DM is paying attention to you. You need to cheat better, right? And so, and look at the size of this thing. This is going to take me like an hour and a half. Um, so I'm not sure that that's going to solve the problem. If you tell them, look, I know you're cheating, and I'm going to be watching you from now on, that's also bad, because now they know you think they're cheating, and they're going to get insulted. And they also, and you know, hilariously enough, the people who actually cheat get the most offended when accused of cheating. They're not offended that they're not embarrassed that they cheated. They're just mad that you caught them. And I sometimes have this happen with students who like plagiarize a paper or something. They're not mad. I know we got to get these guys out of the heal here. Let's see if we can pull them out, because they're just going to keep healing as I hit them, and that's just going to make it take longer. They're not embarrassed that they were caught cheating. They're mad that I caught them. Right? And if you accuse a student who actually cheated of cheating, they will get the most indignant. If you say to somebody, look, it looks like you may have cheated, I need some evidence to the contrary, and they didn't cheat, usually they're like, okay, I'll provide it because they didn't cheat. So the person who should be offended is the person who didn't cheat, right? Should be offended that you thought they cheated. But they're usually not. It's usually the person who actually cheated that's offended. And you're going to see the same thing with players in a game, right? They're going to be offended that you caught them cheating, essentially. They're going to act all indignant that how dare you imagine that I could cheat? How dare you think I'm a cheater? But we all know you cheated. So I don't know where the indignance is coming from. You cheated, and we know it. And we had a player do this in my Champions game. I'm pretty sure I've described this before. Who was lying about his endurance. His character absolutely sucked endurance. He had all these very high endurance powers, and he would run them all at the same time. A very high endurance force field, right? It was like a, at the time it was 1 endurance per 5 points, and it was like a 60-point force field. It was like plus 30 force field, which was, by the way, illegal in our group. You weren't supposed to have that much. But he gave it to himself anyway, and somehow it was allowed, even though he knew it was over the limit. And so the way we kind of limited him was we said, well, your base defense PD ED has to be really low. So we had like a 5 or 6 PD and 5 or 6 ED, and then plus 30 force field. And he did it because his argument was it's a 60-point elemental control, and the way elemental controls worked back then, it was, you couldn't put something less than the active points of the base power, and so he just made his base power 60 points, and then gave himself a 30-point discount on 30 inches of flight, which is 60 points, and a 30-30 force field, which is 60 points, and somehow or other he had desolidification in it as well, and all of these things cost like 12 endurance to use. So he would fire his energy blast, that's 12 endurance. I think that was on reduced endurance, so that's 6. He'd run his force field, which is like 12. He'd fly for another 6, and then run his desolidification for 12, and use like, what is that, 52 endurance in a single phase? And the guy only had like 60 endurance total. So one of the other players, at one point looked at his character sheet. He's like, how the heck is this guy doing all these things in every phase and still have any endurance left? This doesn't make any sense. So when he took over as game master, he demanded copies. He said, I want backup copies of everybody's character sheet. One reason was the one guy who was always late, and it was a different player, and his attitude was, we're going to play without him, and I'm just going to run his character as an NPC. He didn't tell them that, because if he had told them that, the guy would have said, I'm not providing you with my character, because I don't want you running my character when I'm late. So he ran that guy's character as an NPC. And then the other guy's character, he had his character sheet, so he just had a sheet of scratch paper, and as he used his endurance, this GM, these guys, this GM started tracking the endurance. And after like 2 phases, the the player did something and the GM rolled some dice and he said you take 17 stun or something as endurance. 17 endurance as stun or whatever, yeah. And you basically you're using stun as endurance. And the way it works is when you go down to 0 endurance and you still use endurance-based powers, you start taking damage and you can knock yourself out. So the guy took all this damage, no defense against it because you're using your stun as endurance. And he said, "What do you mean I'm taking stun as endurance? I still have 11 endurance left." And the GM was like, "No, you don't. You're at 0." And the player was like, "No, I'm not. Like, first of all, how do you know?" And the GM's like, "I'm keeping track." And the player's like, "Well, you made a mistake." And the GM said no, and he said you use this power for this endurance and this power for this endurance and this power for this endurance, and you're at 0. And then the player got really indignant. How dare you track my character's endurance? And the rest of us were like, well, dude, you're cheating. Of course the GM's going to track your endurance when you cheat. Don't cheat and it won't matter. Now, I would have been pretty unhappy if the GM was tracking my endurance too, because I gave him no reason to think I was cheating. But this guy was actual cheating, and what he was mad about was that he got caught. So now we have to watch out here, because these guys are going to try to damage this obelisk. And we have to get in there and protect it. And I don't know if we're going to be able to taunt these guys out without them attacking the obelisk. So this is basically going to be a boss fight in terms of mentality. We're going to have to ignore all these debuffers and go in there and beat the chambers. We have to do this. And then if we need to, we can run out. But we've got to kill these guys, because otherwise they're going to attack the podium, and that's what we're trying to protect. And then we fail the mission. And they're laying tons of debuff on me. There's nothing I can do about that. And look at this, multiple demon lords. We'll just try to kill as many of them as we can. And I don't think the circle is going to attack this thing. I think it's the Banished Pantheon who do. Oh, no, he's attacking it. Let's taunt. Let's taunt again. Just try to make sure that they're on me and not it. And we're just going to have to suffer here. There's nothing we can do about it. Okay, that's good. We chased him off. I don't know why I still got this on my tray. No, I meant to remove it. That's the jetpack. We don't need that. Can we get him? Alright, we saved it. Now we're going to have to wait for the Banished Pantheon to come in here. So yeah, I mean, it's very hard when you are dealing with a player, it's a friend of yours, and they're cheating at the game. Matt Colville talks about this. He said if they're cheating on die rolls, as long as it's not something blatant where the other players can clearly see that they're cheating on the die rolls and they know that the GM knows it and he's just allowing it. If it's just somebody who's sort of rolling the dice and they're occasionally making it look like they actually hit when they miss or whatever, he just kind of lets it go because he feels like, well, maybe there's something going on in this person's life right now where they need to hit, they need to succeed. But if somebody's blatantly lying about the rules, or lying about what their spell effects are, or they're lying about having spells, and you let that keep going, and the players start to realize, right? I mean, one of the things that happened with this character that was using all this ridiculous endurance in Champions is we knew, like everybody, all but one of us knew he was doing it. The one guy just wasn't tracking it and just assumed he was honest. But the rest of us were like, there's no way that this guy who is using all this endurance every phase is still able to fight 3 or 4 phases later. He should be way at zero. All the rest of us are running out of endurance, and we use less endurance, way less endurance than this guy. Why is he using so much endurance and still fine? And so you can't just let that continue, because eventually all the players are going to realize you're letting this guy cheat. You're letting this guy do things that the rules say he can't do. And here come some bad guys. Let's see if we can go meet them. So I was waiting for these guys because I knew they were going to come. Fortunately, these are BP and not circles, so they shouldn't be debuffing me at least. There's going to be, I think, 3 of these attacks, so we can't leave it. Because we have to, like, protect it. And I don't know how big the base is. I mean, it's possible that I don't know if there's any more to this base. There may not be. It's possible, like, let's say there was one room over here with a couple of guys in it. We could go and defeat them before the BP come. But, oh man, they are going to take forever to get here, aren't they? Let's see if we can cut them off. I don't think anything is going to come behind us. I think they're all going to keep coming from the same place. It's dangerous to do this because if the next set spawns in here, they'll destroy the obelisk before I can get back. But they may have a really hard time getting to us because of the teleporters. Right? Like, they clearly don't know where they're going. And the mission's going to make me defeat them before we can complete it. Come on. I hate these teleport things. Alright, so now we just need to go south. Oh wait, north. They're coming up this way. Okay. Hopefully the others will spawn in the same place, because if they spawn down here, I'm not going to be able to get back to it in time. But otherwise, you're just going to stand there and wait, right? Because they can't figure out where to go. There they are. And this thing, there's nobody there. I don't think. Yeah, so I'm like, I told the guy, I have no good advice. If you ignore it, it's going to destroy the integrity of the game, and eventually the other players are going to realize it's happening. If you confront the guy, there's a very high probability that there's going to be a fight, and he's going to quit the group, which is kind of what happened to our guy. You can try to be nice about it and non-confrontational, but the odds are either the person's going to lie about it and then just keep doing it, and try to keep finding more sophisticated ways to get away with it, or they're going to know you were calling them a cheater and get mad. It's very difficult. And the problem is that it's not something like misunderstanding the rules or not understanding how to roleplay. Blatantly cheating like that, making up stuff that you know isn't true, and trying to get the GM to believe you so that you can do things it doesn't say you can do on your character sheet. That's a personality flaw in the person, right? The person is a person who's going to do this, and so you can't fix that, right? That person actually needs to change as a human being and not be the sort of player who's going to cheat, and that's very difficult. I don't want to say it this way, but it's almost like they need counseling, so that they can change who they are as a person so that they're not cheating all the time. And you, as a game master or a fellow player in their game, you can't really fix that. So what you have to hope is it was a mistake, because if it was a mistake, it's correctable. But if it's an actual deliberate cheating, where the person is purposely fudging their die rolls and lying to you about their die rolls, or lying to you about what their character has on their character sheet, or lying to you about which spells they prepared, or lying to you about their endurance in champions, like, we didn't fix it, right? My really good friend, the game master, who tracked this guy and told him you were wrong and did it right in front of everybody and basically proved to the rest of us that this guy was cheating. It didn't actually work, right? It stopped him from cheating at the moment, but within a month or two, he had left our game group and we never played with him again. It didn't stop him from cheating, it stopped him from playing with us. Because what he wanted was to have this character who had more powerful more powerful powers than everybody else in the group, which the rest of us didn't find okay, right? And most of us said, well, you can have that because you're going to be sucking endurance all the time. And then he cheated on the endurance because he still wanted to be the best in the group. And if somebody wants to do that as a player and be the best and have it all be about them, you can't fix that by saying, dude, you need to play by the rules, because it's not about the rules. It's about them wanting to be the star. Again, and this goes back to what I said an episode or two ago, this guy should have just written his own comic book, right? And found somebody to draw it so that he could have his character do all these things and be able to do it. But in a game where there's balance and there are other players, you can't do that. So we weren't able to fix his cheating. We basically just stopped playing with him. Because again, it's a personality flaw that he had, that he needed to cheat at champions, not a mistake he was making. It's not something that we could correct, right? Maybe if he went to some counseling, if he talked to a psychiatrist for a while, and the psychiatrist was able to get at the roots of why this guy feels the need to be the most powerful, to be in the spotlight, to be the cheater, right? Why does he need to do this? Why can't he just be part of the group? Maybe he could have come back and played with us and it would have been fine. He was nice otherwise. But there was clearly something going on with him that made him need to do this. And when we told him you can't, essentially, he just stopped playing. He couldn't play champions fair. He needed his character to be better than everybody else. And if he played it fair, his character would have just been equal to everybody else. Right? He would have played it fair if we'd said, your character can have 200 endurance, and then he would have tracked it correctly. But because we had maxima in our campaign for every attribute, every stat, every power, there was a maximum number of active points or whatever, he couldn't have 200 endurance. That would have been 100 active points of endurance, and 60 active was the max in our campaign. And even that would have been 120 endurance. He didn't have the points for that, right? So if we'd said you can have 60 free points and give yourself 120 endurance, then he wouldn't have cheated. But because we had rules and we made him follow the other rules, he broke the rules in ways that he thought we wouldn't notice so that he could still be the most powerful one on the board. Because it wasn't about the rules. It was about him being better than everybody else. And again, that's a personality flaw. Right? Somebody said to the GM who posted about this, your guy wants to be awesome, let him be. And no, he doesn't want to be awesome. He wants to be the star of the show. He wants to be the guy that killed the Hydra, the guy that counterspelled the fireball, etc., the guy that the group couldn't do without. And again, that's something that's a problem he has as a person, and he needs to deal with that problem. Otherwise, he's going to do this in every game he plays. All right, she says, good work. If the obelisk had been destroyed, the energy would be leveling a big chunk of the city. She gives us a new contact. And then we look at our available missions. We're going to take one of these next time, guys. Until then, because I think this has been a long enough episode, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes on the Rebirth server.